When you hear these words, what do you immediately think of? He's a true gentleman. He comes from good people. He knows what he is doing. She is kind and gentle with people. He is good to his mom and daddy. We all know people like that. She is someone who takes care of things, and I can always count on her to come through. When you hear these things about a person, what is it that you know even before you meet? So the question is this: what is character? Why is character important? And how does one develop a good character? Well, whenever I'm getting ready to teach a new class, I always go to the dictionary and I look a definition up. And when one goes in to define character, it means the way someone thinks, feels, and behaves. But it also can mean someone's personality or a set of qualities that are shared by many people in a group. So, these are my questions for you today as you're watching this presentation. What is it that helped you develop into a fully functioning professional adult? How do you go about learning group norms? How did you learn to share? How did you develop your own concept of fundamental fairness? And finally, how did you develop your concept of right versus wrong? I asked myself the same questions, and to come up with my answers, I put together a matrix or a chart, and I started thinking about these questions, and I came up with groups or people that I was affiliated with as a child. I thought about the activities or the skill sets I learned in various groups, the values that I learned from these groups, and then finally what impact it had on my character. So this next slide basically shows all the different groups or activities that I participated in as a child from first grade to 12th grade. And the first one I could think of was Sunday school and vacation Bible school. These were activities that I did each week and over the summer. The next activity would be Cub Scouts. I would go on to youth choir, to Little League baseball, 4-H and 4-H camp. I was involved in 4-H during middle school, and I went to 4-H camp probably 3 summers. The next would be Boy Scouts and Scout camp. I was in the Boy Scouts from age about 11 until I was 18. And I went to Scout camp just about every summer. There was also church youth group. I also played a couple of years of high school football. And also I was in the drama club. So these are the activities that I was involved in from first grade to 12th grade. Okay, the next thing that I did was I just took one activity and I listed all the things that I had learned, again, outside of school that helped me to develop my character. And the activity I chose was Cub Scouts. I was in Cub Scouts from the 2nd through the 4th grade, which would have been, I'm guessing, 7 to about 10. And in Cub Scouts, we played games, we did arts and crafts, and of course our motto was do a good deed daily. And I still remember my den mother, Mrs. Juanita Elmore, and I was in Cub Scout Pack 502. So next, let's look at the skill sets that were taught in Cub Scout activities. And the first one would be taking turns. We learned to draw and to build stuff. We learned to share. We learned about working in groups and playing on a team. We had to be on time. School got out at 3:15. I had to be at the meeting at 3:30. I learned to respect the leaders, the group leaders, not only the team leaders, but also my den mother. And I also learned how to follow as well as how to lead. We were taught how to be gracious winners and gracious losers. And that's a skill that's learned. That doesn't just come automatically. I had to learn to respect other people and their contributions. We did community service. And of course, we had to wear a uniform. And so we had to have that appropriate attire. To be in uniform, we had to have everything that was required. So these are just some of the skill sets that were taught in Cub Scouts. So how did these skill sets instill values that positively impacted my character at this age? Well, the first would be, I think, a healthy self-esteem. Learning to work in groups, to have successes, to have some failures, but to have a healthy self-esteem. The next would be a sense of self, as well as a sense of others, of where I ended and others began. I also learned a duty to a group, as well as a duty to a community. So in other words, I had my team that I was on, or my group that I was in, my den, or my pack, the Cub Scout pack, and also a duty to the community. We would do community service, and I realized that that was important. Also developed a moral compass of what was right and wrong for that age-appropriate activity. I also understood obligations. In other words, if I was supposed to bring cookies for the meeting and I didn't show up with cookies, then we didn't have a snack. So understanding that if I made a commitment, I had an obligation to come through. Also, a duty to country as well as patriotism. While I had learned to say the Pledge of Allegiance in school, it was in Cub Scouts that I learned all the meaning behind that pledge and understand about our country's flag and so on. I also learned to set goals because you had to earn badges, and you had to earn badges by a certain time, so you would set a goal, and also the satisfaction of meeting a goal. As well as time management. Again, if school got out at 3:15, I had to be at the meeting by 3:30, and I had to manage my time. Personal style. Okay, I'm kind of joking here, but this is where we're talking about the Scout uniform. And again, here's a photo of a Scout in uniform. This is not me, but this would have been an example of a Cub Scout uniform about the time that I was in Cub Scouts. Of course, I was as round as I was tall, so this is definitely not a picture of me. But you'll see that these are different skill sets did develop my character and help me develop into the person that I am. I'd like to tell you a quick story about a student I had in class one year. Now, he was always late for class, and for the first 2 weeks of school, we would get into these arguments after class had started. He would come in late, he wouldn't have his books, he wouldn't have paper or pencil, and I let him disrupt my class every day. Now, a little bit about this student. He usually would roam the halls and would cut classes quite a bit, but he was just usually late. So I knew the student didn't like me, and I didn't like the student, and I think the student picked up on that. And so we went through this battle every day, and so I decided that, I don't know what to do to change this, because he always had excuses. And so I thought, well, if I can't change anything else, I can at least change my attitude. And so that's how I approached it. So one day, I always stand at the door and greet my students as they come in. And as the bell sounded, here he came, walking down the hall with a big grin on his face. And I waited for him. And when he got to my classroom, I stuck up my hand and I said, "Man, high five, you are almost on time." And he kind of grinned and looked at me, and I said, "Have you got your book or your papers?" And he started to make an excuse. And I said, No. What I'm saying is, if you don't have one, I've got some I can loan you. And I said, "Listen, I'm glad you're here. Come on in." And I went and got him a book and some paper and a pen, and we started class. Well, the next day, what do you think happened? He was on time. And so, again, he was coming into the classroom. The bell was ringing, and I said, "Man, high five 2 days in a row. Man, I'm really glad you're here." And of course, I could see he didn't have any books with him, but I said, "Hey, do you do you need a book?" And again, he started to give me an excuse, and I said, "No, no, no, I've got one for you already." And I had it right there at the door. And I said, "I'm glad you're here. Come on in." Just my changing my attitude towards this student, we stopped fighting. And he started to be on time for my classes. And he was coming to class every day. Well, every day that he hadn't been suspended, but or in school suspension, but he came to my class. And as a matter of fact, the kid was very smart. He had beautiful handwriting, and he still pushed me a little bit in class, but I kind of worked with him. And when I would catch him cheating, which he would, I would pull him aside out of earshot from any other students, and I would say, "Look," I'd kind of whisper to him, and I'd say, "Look, you have fooled every other teacher in this school but me. I know you're smart. I know you can do this work. Besides, when you copy another student's paper, all you're doing is working on your handwriting. And you know what? You've already got a nice handwriting. So why don't you take this and do it over and show me what you know? Because I know you can do it." Well, and again, our relationship changed. While there was a lull in class, I kind of pulled him aside and I said, "Hey, what are your plans after graduation?" And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, "No, no, no. Now, something about the student, he was probably 16 or 17 already, and he was marked as a ninth grader because he hadn't passed any of his classes. And I really think I was the only teacher that had asked him about graduation. Everybody else assumed that he wouldn't graduate." And he looked at me like, "Man, are you crazy?" And I got very serious, and I said, "Look, I came in to teach, and I'm very serious about my job. And my job is to do everything I can possibly do for you to get you to pass my class and to go on and graduate. And I take that job very seriously. And your job is to do everything you can do to pass my class and to go on and graduate. And let me tell you, I will be out there cheering for you when you graduate and when you walk across that stage." And so as the class went on, when he was kind of sloughing off work or not really doing his work, I'd say, "Man, I got to cheer you at graduation. You got to keep doing your work if you're going to pass my class." And he'd stop and think about it and grin and said, "Okay, Mr. Lee, I'll start to work." And this went on for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Now, what I haven't told you so far is that this student had an electronic monitoring bracelet around his ankle. And so this means he's already been in trouble with the law. But the school secretary would call my room every Thursday to get him to come to the office to change the battery. And the reason why is she knew he would be in my class because he cut all of his other classes. And for 6 weeks, he came to my class every day. Okay, I'd like for you to think about this. What is it that I did with this student that made a difference? What do you think I did? Well, number one, I developed a relationship with him. Students can spot a phony a mile away. And what I did is I changed my attitude about the student, and the student immediately picked up on it. The student knew that I cared about him and that I really did want him to graduate. Now, I will admit, it was probably easier when the student wasn't in class. But you know what? I don't get to pick my students. And I learned a lot from that student. The student made a decision to come to class every day because he knew if he was not in class, I would come looking for him. I would take his work to in-school suspension myself and talk to him, made sure he had a book, made sure he had what he needed to do. And I think the student picked up on it. So what I did was I cared about the student. I asked him about graduation. I asked him about what goals he had for the future. Every student needs an adult on their side rooting for them to be successful. I know I had that in all the activities I participated in, and it was very important to my life and to my own development. So I think I was the teacher that really cared about this student. And let me tell you, he was not easy to deal with. But it also made my classes run a lot easier. And you know, this student actually helped me discipline in class. And what I mean by this is the class would get a little bit rowdy, and the student would say, "Hey guys, Mr. Lee's getting that look about himself. Y'all better chill out and sit down." And I'd kind of grin and I'd say, "Yeah, you're right. Come on, we need to get back to work." But that was what I mean by developing a relationship with him. I wasn't his friend, but I was friendly. And I think every one of our students needs a person like that in their life. Because you know, a student's going to get attention, and they're going to get it either positively or negatively. And he was getting his attention by doing negatives. And again, I turned it around, so I was giving him positives. You know, it's important to remember that these students are still children. Now, they may be 16 or 17, hold down a part-time job and be driving automobiles, but they're still children. And you know what? Children do childish things. And sometimes we need to take it as an opportunity to teach, not to punish. We need to model behavior that builds self-esteem. And this is a trick that I've used, and it really appears to work. When I have to pull a student aside, I say this, and I'm always in an even tone when I'm speaking, as I say, "Look, I'm not angry at you, and I'm not yelling at you. Okay? I'm just really concerned. Talk to me. What's going on? Why are you acting this way today?" And most of the time, they'll tell me. If the class is boring, it's boring, and they'll tell me why. And so that gives me an opportunity to differentiate instruction or to really talk to the student to see what's going on. And again, it's a great old trick. I'm not angry at you, and I'm not yelling at you. Another reason I do that is when somebody yells at me, I just turn off. I don't listen to it. And I think our students are the same way. When we're yelling in class, they're not listening. We're venting, and it's not doing any good. It's just basically making the situation worse. So try to remember that. I'm not angry at you, and I'm not yelling at you. I'm just talking to you because I'm concerned. When we initially started, I asked you to think about what is it that helped you develop into a fully functioning professional adult. How did you go about learning group norms? How did you learn to share? How did you develop your own concept of fundamental fairness, as well as how did you develop your first concept of right versus wrong? And so there's lots of things that go into developing our character. And so this is my question. How many of our students participated in Cub Scouts or Brownies? How many were Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts? How many of our students attend a place of worship or a community or recreation center? How many of our students know what community service is? And more importantly, how many of our students have performed community service before required to for graduation? How many have a sense of self-worth and a healthy sense of self-esteem? Because these things just don't come from staying home and watching TV, but it takes from interacting with people in situations where they have to make good choices. How can I, as an educator in good conscience, get angry or blame a student if the student has not been exposed to good role models? I just can't assume that a student knows how to behave unless we teach them how we expect them to behave. How can I, in good conscience, get angry or blame a student if the student has not had the opportunity to make good choices? And again, I just can't assume that the student knows how to make good choices. I need to help the student understand what a good choice means. And I need to provide opportunities to practice making good choices. Also, it's important to remember that these children may not have had the opportunities that we had. We need to present students with age-appropriate opportunities to help them make good choices that lead to developing a good character. Also, to model what it means to make amends and apologize so they know how to do it graciously. I know we've all had, or we all have seen or had the experience of having a child, okay, now apologize, and the kid says, sorry. Well, we know that that was done definitely begrudgingly. And so at times we need to really show them what it means. I'll tell you, if I make a mistake in my classroom, I will apologize to my students. And they usually say, that's okay, Mr. Lee, we understand. But if I didn't do that, I tried to fake it, again, they can spot a phony. And they'll know that I'm not sincere. I started doing something with my students that if they find a mistake in one of my PowerPoints or one of my handouts, and they're the first one to bring it to my attention, I'll either give them a prize or I'll give them extra credit. And then once they bring it to my attention, right there in front of the class, immediately I will go in and change it to show them that I appreciated them letting me know. And what it goes is it shows we all make mistakes. I also tell my students that the classroom is a safe place to make a mistake or to make an error, because that's where we learn. And I use the example of if we're in science class and we're doing an experiment, do all the experiments work? And of course they say, no, of course not. Well, I said, that's the same way in this class when we're discussing or talking about things. If you have an idea, let's hear it. I want to know what they're thinking, because what I'm teaching these students to do is how to think through problems, how to understand what's going on. I do not want them to be fearful of me or fearful of trying, because that's how they learn. And I think once we can help students understand this, school is going to be a lot more fun, and we're going to be really starting to engage their minds. Okay, activity time. Let's everybody stand up and get a partner. And what I want you to do is to take your palm and put it up in front of you, and have your partner take the corresponding hand and put it up against your palm. Okay. Now, okay, good. Now go ahead and sit down, and we're going to debrief it. Okay, let's debrief this. What happened? Well, normally, like I said, when we're doing this exercise is when I push hard, the other person pushes back hard. And so basically what I'm saying here is that the energy that we put out is usually the energy that we get back. And the reason I talk about this is that if I am positive and friendly and treat my students with kindness and fairness and empathy, then most of the time the students will respond back in a positive manner. And so if you're having really bad issues with classroom management, a lot of what I say is, how are you treating the students? What is your attitude towards the students? Because if you have a negative attitude, they're going to pick it up and they're going to give it right back to you. And again, I'm talking in generalities here, but most of the time the energy that we put out is the energy that we get back. To use a metaphor, really teaching is all about planting seeds. And we may not ever be there or see or experience the harvest. But we have to work with our students if we want better students. We have to have compassion. We have to have care about our students. And once the student feels our care and our compassion, then we will make a connection and we will have a better relationship. So in conclusion, my parting words are this: be the change you wish to see. If you want better students, then take the time to develop a real relationship with those students. Ask questions. Be ready to wait and listen for the response. And you know what? Don't just assume you know the answers. Practice active listening. If you want a better boss or a better employee or a better spouse for that matter, take the time to develop a true relationship. Ask questions and be ready to wait and listen for the response. Again, don't just assume you know the answers. Relationships are really easy. You can begin by asking a simple question such as, "How's your day going?" And then stop and actively listen for a response. Because there's no better time to begin than right now. It really is all about the relationship. My name is Ernie Lee, and I am very proud to be a Georgia teacher. Thank you for your time.